Western development models often approach Afghanistan under a flawed assumption that the country is a blank slate, devoid of legal history and inherently resistant to a functioning modern state. The historical record contradicts this. Between 1933 and 1978, under a constitutional monarchy and later a republic, Afghanistan engineered a period of gradual, culturally grounded progress. The state established a bicameral parliament, codified civil laws, and governed through functional institutions. This era saw massive educational expansion. By the 1970s, Kabul University had grown to over 10,000 students. Women organically integrated into public life, entering medicine, education, and government administration through steady social evolution rather than forced decrees. This chart captures the height of that progress. By 1978, agricultural modernization allowed Afghanistan to produce 4 million tons of wheat, enough to feed its population of 15 million. Primary and secondary educational enrollment surpassed 1 million students. Crucially, this development was largely self-financed. A professional bureaucracy collected domestic revenue to manage expenditures, while an independent judiciary enforced the law, achieving this growth with minimal reliance on foreign assistance. The baseline reality confirms a deep indigenous capacity for development. The subsequent collapse was the outcome of violently imposed disruption, rather than an inherent civilizational failure. The rupture occurred in 1978 with a communist coup, followed quickly by the Soviet invasion. This was the first catastrophic attempt to impose an external model, Marxist-Leninism, onto an established traditional society. The Soviet occupation killed over 1 million Afghans and displaced millions more. The invaders deliberately targeted the traditional village councils, religious institutions, and educational networks that had historically connected the central state to the local population. The violence compounded after the Soviet withdrawal. During the dark era between 1992 and 1996, victorious Mujahideen factions turned their artillery against each other. In a war for control, they reduced Kabul to rubble and massacred tens of thousands of civilians. The 2001 international intervention repeated the core error of the Soviet era. It attempted to transplant a Western democratic structure while simultaneously empowering the figures who had presided over the country's destruction. The Bonn Conference engineered a fragile coalition of convenience. It granted these faction commanders impunity for their past atrocities, embedding an armed warlord class directly into the architecture of the new state. This compromise created a predatory ecosystem of 3 interlocking extraction systems: the drug mafia, the land mafia, and the bureaucratic mafia. This systemic rot triggered the Kabul bank collapse, where political elites embezzled nearly $1 billion from the state's financial core. At the same time, unchecked opium production fed the drug mafia. Expanding to supply over 80% of the global market, this illicit agricultural economy funded the insurgency and corrupted the government officials tasked with fighting it. The outcome was definitive. In August 2021, despite 20 years of effort and $145 billion in international assistance, the state collapsed in just 11 days. The rapid disintegration of the Afghan security forces was the final symptom of an artificial state architecture. Deprived of local loyalty, a system built on extraction and foreign models could not sustain itself once its external support was removed. Today, the Taliban exert full territorial control. The insurgency is over, provincial road travel is secure, and a strict government ban has resulted in a 95% drop in opium cultivation. But this physical stability carries a devastating human cost. Through an institutionalized system of discrimination, the current government explicitly excludes millions of women and girls from secondary education and participation in public life. The structural constraints are equally severe. Any future government must sustain a population that has exploded to 41 million people, restricted by isolated geography, severe water scarcity, and heavily degraded physical infrastructure. Attempting to rebuild a 20th century brick-and-mortar bureaucracy under these conditions is financially and structurally impossible. Afghanistan must abandon legacy systems entirely and execute a precise 3-phase engineering sequence: triage, transition, and protopia. Phase 1 is triage, deploying scarce resources to prevent mass humanitarian collapse. Phase 2 is transition, migrating basic civic functions to digital infrastructure, serving a dispersed population. To survive its deep fragility, Afghanistan must bypass 20th century models and engineer a decentralized, high-tech state architecture. In healthcare, the conventional development approach requires building large, specialist-staffed hospitals in every provincial capital. Afghanistan lacks the billions of dollars and the trained medical specialists necessary to implement this. The AI-enabled triage alternative circumvents this completely. Instead of centralized hospitals, the state can equip local community health workers with highly portable diagnostic stations. This chart reveals the economic efficiency of the leapfrog model. A single traditional hospital costs $50 million to construct. A distributed network of AI-equipped health posts delivers wider geographic coverage at less than 0.1% of that capital cost. At these remote stations, health workers perform routine blood and cardiovascular tests, uploading the data to an AI diagnostic cloud. The AI processes standard ailments, reserving the highly limited time of human physicians strictly for complex cases. The critical prerequisite for this network is data transmission. It requires high-speed internet across thousands of miles of rugged mountains, where laying physical fiber optic cable is prohibitively expensive. Low Earth orbit satellite broadband solves this bottleneck instantly. It bypasses the need for grounded physical infrastructure, connecting the most isolated rural clinics to global diagnostic networks in a matter of days. In low-resource, post-conflict environments, high-tech solutions serve as a pragmatic necessity rather than a luxury. They provide the most cost-effective path to widespread humanitarian stabilization. With the population stabilized, the state must restructure its governance mechanisms. The primary objective is permanently eliminating the ghost worker payrolls and bureaucratic mafias that drained the previous government. Utilizing the Aadhaar model built by India, Afghanistan can institute a biometric digital identity system. This verifies the physical existence of every citizen, guaranteeing that humanitarian aid and state services bypass corrupt intermediaries and flow directly to individuals. This transition must also solve the education crisis. The state has to educate millions of young people, despite a severe lack of trained teachers, ruined physical infrastructure, and heavy political restrictions. This requires the learning hall concept, low-profile, solar-powered facilities that utilize AI curriculum stations. These are designed for rapid deployment in neighborhoods, requiring only basic supervision rather than a large public-facing faculty. Because these systems operate offline and can be hosted in private, community-protected spaces, they function as a technical extension of existing underground schools. This decentralized model allows for segregated learning that respects local social patterns while bypassing the logistical visibility of a traditional state school system. A parallel transition is required for agriculture. With the opium economy banned, 70% of the Afghan workforce needs immediate climate-smart farming alternatives to survive on their smallholder plots. Precision farming intelligence can be delivered directly to these populations using AI-powered voice chatbots on platforms like WhatsApp or Telegram. Farmers can ask questions out loud in Dari or Pashto, receiving real-time guidance on soil management, pest control, and optimal planting times. The transition phase replaces the centralized, predatory bureaucracy of the past with a resilient and distributed digital public infrastructure. This structural redesign enables the final phase, protopia. Protopia does not mean a flawless utopian endpoint. It is a society specifically engineered for continuous, incremental learning and capability building. To achieve this, political systems must be grown from local roots. The Republic failed because it attempted to force the highly complex logistics of direct, Western-style elections onto an environment completely unsuited for them. Effective governance must scale upward from the traditional village jirga. This ancient functional method of consensus can serve as the baseline to select district councils, which then select provincial representatives, creating a tiered structure of accountability rooted in recognized competence. This organic political evolution faces a severe threat from elements of the diaspora and exiled warlords, who are currently attempting to leverage the national crisis to negotiate their return to power. But the Afghan population overwhelmingly rejects these figures, as the cultural mandate explicitly warns, as mudara as mudan katast. To test the already tested is a mistake. A protopian Afghan state must be entirely sovereign, utilizing the leverage of modern technological innovation,
but filtering its application exclusively through its own deep-rooted mechanisms of consensus. Afghanistan holds a unique, highly constrained advantage. Precisely because its legacy institutions have been completely shattered, the nation has the rare capability to leapfrog the slow industrial stages that bottlenecked other developing countries. Realizing this leap requires fusing scalable AI tools with Afghanistan's ancient civilizational resources, its unmatched resilience, and its deep traditions of community solidarity. The trauma of the last 45 years has been absolute. Yet, as the poet Rumi, born in Balkh, taught, the wound is the place where the light enters. The successful integration of scalable technology with ancient community resilience offers a blueprint for other societies facing collapse. In the mountains of the Hindu Kush, the work of regeneration begins as a practical necessity, demonstrating that even a deeply fractured society